I said to my seat partner that it is really, really unfortunate that I have to follow Kristen Hughes with my Seedleaf presentation. But as I also like to say, Seedleaf and Food Chain are best friends. And I'll talk a little bit about what we do together to really solidify our best friend friendship. But yes, I'm the executive director of Seedleaf. I am the second director since its founding. Really, when Seedleaf was started in 2007, so we are now a 17-year-old organization, believe it or not, it was with this idea that if we work together in community, we could access beauty and we can access local food that we can grow together and share together, because in growing stronger communities, what we can do that is through just eating together, through doing shared work together. And so London Farrell Community Garden was that beginning. Have you guys, people in the room, have you ever passed by or gone to London Farrell? Excellent. So this is an extraordinary site in Lexington, and it's not too often that I think it's celebrated. But this site, which is adjacent to the Old Episcopal Burying Grounds, was where in the cholera epidemic, I think of 1833, London Farrell, a black man born into slavery in Virginia, was one of the few ministers in town who would stay to bury the dead and the dying. So mass graves of cholera victims were sort of put into the Episcopal Burying Grounds. Today, it's a historic site, and it's named after London Farrell for his act of sacrifice. What's unique about this space is that it has an Irish cemetery, and London Farrell, he's been reinterred in the Lexington Cemetery, but at the time, he was the only African American to be buried in this site. So it is a site that talks to or speaks to old Lexington, our history as a racially segregated society, particularly in the antebellum period. And, you know, today, what we're trying to do to reactivate that space, sort of explore this history of Lexington, its racialized histories, while also trying to do work of bringing people together through growing and sharing food, which is our mission. So at this garden, we are there because we are supported generously by Christ Church Cathedral downtown. And here, over the years, we have built relationships with neighbors, with, you know, to the right, or I suppose to the west, we are neighbored by the Lexington Fire Department, and those guys are great. They always come over and help in a pinch. Behind us is Camp C and the Living Arts and Science Center that also does programming in the space. We're surrounded on the north side by the Lyric Theater, where there's, like, you know, the ability to do collaborations. And in this space, more specifically, we often have partners who come in to do education work as well. So we really sort of promote this idea of working in community with other groups and organizations to do this work. And so from that moment in 2007, where we were just one garden, at some point we kind of went mad and said, well, let's do 15 gardens, which was quite, let me tell you, today we are back down to 10, and I am so grateful because there was one point where we were doing 15 gardens and picking up household compost and compost from over 60 restaurants. And if you can imagine me by myself on a cold winter's day after having to make sure that nothing, you know, that the gardens are clean, tidy, even in winter, and then go and sling 6-gallon buckets onto a solitary truck to drive out to Coldstream. It was quite a miserable existence there for a while. So today things are a little bit better, but we have these 10 community garden locations where we have really learned, like, how to make sure that we are talking and communicating with neighbors about these spaces. Many of these spaces have a volunteer coordinator who is a volunteer from the community who lives nearby, who entertains volunteers, who checks on those gardens to make sure that, you know, they're clean and they're tidy, or if there's a problem, they're the first ones to alert us, right? And each of these gardens also represent a promise to the communities that we serve. When we think about Seedleaf and we think about growing food, we want people to have access to fresh, nutrient-dense food, but we want them to have access to all the really good, juicy stuff. We don't want every garden just to have loads of tomatoes, garlic, and onion. We want the experience to be like going into a Whole Foods or a fresh market. We want you to go and get the really weird goji berries or the medlars, right? We want you to know what those things are. So we do quite a bit of programming in all of these spaces to show you not only what these things are, what they taste like, but also how to grow these things. And so Kristen mentioned a really good point that I think is worth reiterating, which is that Seedleaf does not want to be the gardener for Lexington. Seedleaf does not want to be the gardener for North Lexington. What we are trying to do is create beauty with people, share meals and food with people, but also share skills. Our hope is that you all, or the people that we serve, the people who visit our gardens, get the skills to grow their own food no matter where they are, what their income level is. We work really hard to make sure that we are sharing resources for people to not find any barrier to going and getting a seed in the ground and creating something that their family and that their friends can share in. And we really believe in that there is something magical, that there is something nourishing of the spirit and the mind and the body when you are able to take a seed and turn that into a meal for yourself and the people who are closest to you. And so in all of these spaces, what we're trying to do all the time is just those things. And we really do sort of push forward these values that local food is important. It's, where we should prioritize what goes on our plate. We believe in community interdependence, that we can only be self-sufficient by relying upon one another and learning from one another. And that, again, that we have this ability to do things that seem somewhat weird and odd. Like for a lot of people, unfortunately today, growing your own food seems like a really hard thing to do. But we try to do everything in our power to dissuade that sentiment. Everyone has the ability to do cool stuff. I also want to say that if you go to any of our garden spaces, they all look different. I mentioned this idea of wanting you to have this feeling of going to a fresh food or a Whole Foods, or a fresh market in a Whole Foods. But also, I should say that we have some gardens that have exercise equipment in it. Because when we spoke to neighbors about what they wanted to see in our community gardens, they said, well, we really want to exercise, and no one has like $60 every month to go to the Y. Not knocking the Y, I love the Y, but it's just trying to meet different groups of people where they're at. So we said to ourselves, well, how can we support neighbors who want to work out and exercise and have access to fresh food? Well, let's work with the city of Lexington to get funding and put in municipal grade exercise equipment. So at our Whitney Avenue garden, that's what we have. At our Castlewood Park location, we were working with community members who did a huge sort of planning session where they had asked people, over the course of, a few months, what are some of the things that you would like to see in your local park? And more, what we're hearing from people is that there is a desire for local fruits, that in our gardens, we can prioritize the vegetables, the lettuce, the greens, the tomatoes, and so on, but so rarely do you get access to apples or pears, right? And so really starting to focus more on fruit. So at Castlewood, we have an orchard. If you go in the park, kitty-corner from the playground, there is an orchard that has European pears, Asian pears. There's a Nanking cherry that rarely ever puts out any cherries. And there's a persimmon tree, right? And so we have those items there. In our London Farrell garden, we have apple trees, we have pawpaw trees, loads of fig trees, right? And so this just gives you an idea that every garden that we have has something different, something unique. And so it's worth, doing a hop around to see these different spaces. And so I put these pictures here because I can't take you with me, although I wish I could, to see some of these garden locations. But I wanted to highlight just what they look like and what we do in these spaces. So in the top right is a photo of Buff Plus 2. As Kristen was mentioning, we collaborate on a program called Bluegrass Urban Farm Friends. And it's not meant to just be, a cuddle fest between Seedleaf and Food Chain, although we do like to cuddle. But it's meant to be an umbrella to incorporate many of our friends, many different nonprofits and organizations that are working to spread the word about fresh food, local food, and environmental stewardship and responsibility. So I'll talk a little bit more about that and how that is changing. But at this site, One of the things that Seedleaf does to support growers is that we work with Miss Sharon Stone, who's the owner of Two Sons Farm, and we had these kids who had gone through our programming previously, and Sharon stepped up and said, well, I would love to show the kids who are done with the programming what they could do if they were to really work in a farm space throughout the entire summer, growing things from seed and then bringing it to market. And so that's what they did in that space. Down below is Mr. Jamie Dockery, the Fayette County Extension Agent, who is giving a class in our London Feral Orchard about tree pruning and tree care. We had a volunteer day, and Seedleaf thrives on volunteers. This year alone, year to date, we have had over 464 volunteers who have made our spaces work. Without them, there is no way that we can do this. We are a small organization of 7 people. If we do not have volunteers and community input, Seedleaf simply ceases to exist. And so it is really important. And so we take volunteers in all shapes, all sizes. And this little munchkin was helping to pull weeds with her teddy bear that one day. We also have groups who come and help us out. So the top left is Whole Foods. When they bring out a team, they roll 30 deep, and they can help us clean up so much, and we are deeply appreciative of them. But the thing that I also want to sort of exemplify within all this hard work that we do, volunteering and learning that we do in community, is that we really believe in this idea of having fun and just hanging out together. And we seriously believe that in this moment where we are so glued to screens and where we are so disconnected from each other, right, that as we can see, the result of that is that we have an increasingly disconnected society. But in being in a garden space and coming to hang out, right, we have this unique thing that gets to happen. The unique thing that gets to happen is that we see each other's faces. We make awkward small talk until we slowly become each other's friends, right? We start to expect each other. We start to check in on each other from week to week. And so we seriously start to believe in this thing called having fun, of socializing and having fun, this old school activity. So we love it when kids come into the garden, and that's what that middle picture is, where we had 2 kiddos who were just perfectly dressed in red at the same time our cherry trees were in fruit. So if you look closely, you see 2 little kiddos who have climbed our cherry trees and who are perfectly camouflaged. And there are some days when volunteers come to the garden, and I'm telling you, I'm being quite honest, it is hot as heck outside, and it is really hard to bend over and do anything, where we'll just camp under a tree, and we'll just eat, because why not? You're in a garden. What else are you going to do? We'll just hang out. We'll share, news of our lives, and it's one of the most lovely, deeply inspiring, deeply rewarding things. I believe deeply that I have the best job in the world, and that's because I get to be outside, I get to eat food, and I get to see my friends, during our volunteer hours that we actively have. Oops. So, Seedleaf, over the course of our history, we're realizing, okay, the gardens are great, right? But the amount of food that we want to produce isn't being met, because we know that we have community partners who are saying, we have a need, people are coming in or reaching out to us because they need help with groceries. Or we were encountering people who were saying to us, look, I really want to have a farm. There's no way I can afford a farm in Fayette County. Can Seedleaf help me? You all seem to have land. How do you do it? And so our story of, sort of branching beyond gardening into farming really takes place in 2017, where we leased 2 acres of urban land in Fayette County, within New Circle, actually, behind Biscayne Apartments. This is kitty corner from the Legends baseball stadium. And so you would never know it's there. It's kind of like a secret hideaway, but you go through the parking lot of Biscayne Apartments, and it dead ends into just an open 2-acre field that we have over time taken and developed to be a community farm. So at this site, originally, we hosted our first market gardener, Andrew English, and his family, and they grew for local markets. And what that really proved at the time is that on a little plot of land, you can grow an extraordinary amount of food to supply local markets. They did a CSA as well, and they supported community groups by donating what they could for free. So immediately, once that was proven that we could do that, we turned around and said to Andrew, now that we've poured into you and given you access to land and access to Seedleaf tools and access to water without you having to pay anything for it, can you teach more of our neighbors how to do that? So that inaugurated our Market Garden program, which is a program that we have done every year, except we skipped 1 year. I think it was like after the pandemic, where we enroll a cohort of folks, many of whom don't know how to grow. They are given in-farm training about how to make nice, rows, right? About looking at varieties to see what's suited for a market garden. Learning about food safety, learning about business planning, learning about record keeping, which farmers the world over seem to struggle with. And through that process, also introduced to growers throughout central Kentucky, who are all very different. Everything from going and visiting Tim Hensley out in Berea and looking at his homestead and mushroom production scheme, to going to Salad Days Farm, right? To see how are these different groups of people doing it? How are people creatively managing to live sustainable lives, feed their families, feed themselves, and have a business that at the end of the day, they're excited about. They're not totally worn out and killed by. And so that was in 2017, and from there we've just kept going, but we quickly realized that once we were graduating people, they came back and said to us, okay, now that we've graduated, we still don't know where we're going to get land from, right? Like getting land in Fayette County is just not feasible if you are a beginning farmer, you don't have, millions of dollars, right, to go and invest. And so we had a very curious opportunity in late 2022 where Chad and Jill Walker reached out. They own a farm over on Houston Antioch. And they said, look, we've inherited this land and we want it to go to good use. It's a PDR land. It's PDR, Purchase of Development Rights. What can Seedleaf do with this to benefit the community? And I said, well, Seedleaf has never tackled anything this large, but I'm in for a challenge. Why not? Little adventure. And so we formally leased this land in 2023 and immediately began to think through how can we offer to graduates of our Market Garden program the ability to grow on up to a half acre of land. And the result has been a wild, exponentially expensive journey, because I don't think we could have ever imagined how expensive farming is. It was a lesson for us, believe me, when you scale up. But on this 30 acres of land, we now have over 29 individuals from Empukate. This is a Congolese organization that supports Congolese refugees in growing foodstuffs from their home country. Many refugees who come here, they can't find the things that they used to eat or grow. Many of them were professional farmers in their home country. Through Empukate, they have an opportunity to grow their own foodstuffs for their community and for themselves. And it's a way to have meaningful work within a sort of situation where they're often doing menial tasks because of their English skills and sort of educational background. So we're giving people the ability to grow food from their homes that they've missed. In addition to the group that we have from the Congo, we also support a group of Nepalese growers who, for the same reasons, wanting to grow some of their traditional home foods and not being able to access land, we've given them that opportunity, as well as 5 graduate market gardeners. So they've gone through our program. They've gone through the whole suite of classes. They've gotten food safety training. They have been given the opportunity to sell at the Lexington Farmers Market, and the bug has gotten them, and they want to continue farming. By going to Headwater after they're done with the program, they're able to continue to get all of the perks that they've gotten with Seedleaf. So again, that's free water, that's free tools, that's access to land, access to technical support that they're then able to use, and that gives them strong support for those early years as they're developing their farm records so that one day they can go and get farm loan or farm financing to then go and have their own farm. So we really much now see our role increasingly, besides growing and sharing food, nourishing community, creating beauty, we also see our role as seriously growing growers, not just gardeners, but future farmers here in Fayette County, who then go and sell to our friends at Food Chain or to God's Pantry and so on. I should also say that because we are a nonprofit, and it's important to remember this throughout, it might seem a little bit luxurious that we're giving all of these tools, land, water. That's funded by people like you. So as I go through this spiel, be thinking about how you want to pour back into your Seedleaf and your Food Chain. But we do rely on community support. So we've been really lucky to have a great relationship with First Presbyterian Church, which is also downtown. We are one of their community partners. And thanks to their Cornerstone Commission, we were able to afford a greenhouse to support growers, because if you talk to produce growers, especially new and beginning ones, it's like, well, I don't have space to grow or the starts that I need to get into the field. And so one of the needs that Seedleaf addressed was like, okay, well, let's get a greenhouse that we can all share in late winter so that people can grow the starts that they need to be able to go into the field. And so this is just a picture of some of the activities that we've had on the farm since we have started. We believe seriously in having as much educational opportunities as possible, not only for active market gardener students, but after they graduate, continuing education. And we work with a lot of organizations. We've been really lucky over our 17 years of existence to, I think, become a really trustworthy organization. When we say that we're going to do something, we do it. And we've just proven time and time again that we've been really solid partners. So in the top left corner, we have our Farm Field Day that we've done in partnership with OAK, the Organic Association of Kentucky. Headwater Farm right now is in transition to be organic, which we're really proud to say. It's also something that's really crazy to do for a farm that you are just taking over, because this farm was conventionally farmed for several years, growing just corn. The chemical being sprayed predominantly was Corvus. We're pretty sure that they did not stick to a cover cropping schedule. They just sprayed, planted. And so the soil that we encounter at Headwater is really sort of just, it's been rough, these first few seasons of trying to establish just produce production. But slowly we are starting to see transitions happening within the soil as we increasingly put more and more organic matter in and stick to a cover cropping regime. So Oak came out, we had this great farmer field day where we had farmers, existing farmers, experienced ones, new people who are interested in farming come out to see the different systems that we had set up as a new and beginning farm. And this is fulfilling one of the early aims that we had for this space, that it be a site for education of regenerative ag and what that looks like in its practical application, that it be a site for people from the urban areas of Fayette County to access this wealth that we all share. I mean, often throughout, driving around Lexington, all you see is this sort of imagery of what it means to have bluegrass, or that we have, horses, we have bourbon, right? But it's so rare for people to be able to tap into that. And so that we're able to bring kids from the urban core out into the space that they would have no other, way of getting into, to frolic around the farm, to do hard work, and then to go in the creek when they're all done is pretty awesome. So getting that exposure to people to our bluegrass and to our farm landscapes is really important to us, and that's being exemplified there. We do programming called the Seedleaf Agroforestry Program. This is to really get involved within this burgeoning area of interest where there are existing farmers and new growers who are interested in turning to forested lands to find crops that they can sell to add to their revenue streams if they already have an existing farm, or to really get into farming through agroforestry. So looking at mushrooms, medicinals, looking at foraging for different fruit and nut crops to then add to their products that they offer. That program is led by Mr. Russ Turpin, who has 20 years of experience in conservation and ecological trainings and work. And so that happens once a month. And here they have just built a sort of composting unit. And then down below, these are the group of refugee farmers that I told you about. This is a water day demonstration where we're using the farm as a site to educate people on how to install farm irrigation. So Davis and Ploman Mechanical helped us with that, where they came out, they showed people, it's easy to go and rent a trencher from Sunbelt, how to use the trencher, how to lay pipe. And then we had Grow Appalachia, our partners in Berea, come out and demonstrate drip tape irrigation and set up for that. And so again, ongoing education throughout this process to nourish communities, but also to grow growers. So as I mentioned, the vision for our farm programming, not just Headwater, but across the board, is to provide land access to new and beginning growers to get over this hurdle of not being able to afford to buy or lease land. We want to increase the land that Seedleaf is growing on, specifically to provide food for our community partners, that we are able to share food with the Share Center, that we're able to share food or sell food to Food Chain and so on, is really like, us fulfilling our mission of making sure that all of our neighbors, no matter where they're at, have access to food. We're modeling regenerative agricultural practices, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and explaining the difficulty sometimes of that. And then we're connecting more residents in Lexington to green space. I also want to reiterate, it's this thing about access to farmland. It comes up often, and I think there is a frustration, especially amongst the people that we serve, within downtown Lexington, about, like, what does this stuff have to do with me? Yeah, there are horses, but they're not part of my everyday reality, right? It's so critically important to get buy-in into these spaces, and you can only do that through active participation in these spaces. People have to have a reason and see why this stuff matters. The only other access point to sort of District 12, besides, going to Ravens Run, for example, is Heisel Farm Park. And unfortunately, none of these spaces, provide bus access. Like, you can't, unless you have a car and a really strong reason, you can't get out here. And so being able to provide that is just something that's really important for us. So all in all, it's really obscene how much land that we are managing. So within town, it's only 4 acres, what all of our community gardens add up to. But overall, right, we have 30 acres in District 12 that we are managing. So altogether, that's 34 acres of farmland, and we only have a staff of 7. The farm team is 3 people. Because we believe in hiring from our community, our farm manager is a former market gardener that we're proud to say, who went through the program, had their own business, and said, it looks really good to be the Seedleaf farm manager. I want to get in on that. And we hired them. And then we have an employee from KRM. They came to us and said, we have a lot of senior refugees who are having a hard time finding a job. Ageism, age discrimination, they don't have the language skills, they don't have sort of a formal education, but they were professional agriculturalists in their home country. And, it is hard to find people who still want to do farm labor, who are trained or kind of know what they're doing outside. They can identify weeds and what's something that you want versus something that you don't want. And so we hired Mr. Nizam Witakuzi Athanas, who basically, if I left him to it, could probably replace the remaining 6 Seedleaf employees. He sometimes probably wants to. And we make that work, but it is, again, 7 people for over 34 acres of land here in Fayette County. And so that's where those volunteers that I mentioned earlier come in handy, but also our community partners. So we partner, like I've mentioned before, West 6 Christchurch Cathedral, our friends at Food Chain, New Beginnings Baptist Church, Whole Foods, Good Foods Co-op, First Presbyterian. It is really a community effort that makes Seedleaf work. Again, without these folks and without volunteers, we could not exist. So just to give you a snapshot of what we do with a really, really small team, Seedleaf, although we no longer do compost pickup within Fayette County, we still do composting classes. So perhaps some of you have attended those. We do those in partnership with LFUCG throughout the winter. And it's been fun every year to introduce people to composting. We do courses for different folks throughout the year to get people interested in growing their own food and becoming growers. So for example, we led a 5-class series last year with botanist Robert Peratley. It was called Botany for Gardeners. We work pretty extensively with school programs, and we work also with after-school programs and community centers to be able to provide children with garden club programming to fulfill our mission of growing growers and to making sure that people have the skills they need to grow food wherever they might be. One of the really popular programs that we have is seed distribution. So every year with the Lexington Public Library, with each branch, we distribute over $5,000 of seeds that we purchase from Fedco, and that is free to the community. It's first come, first serve. I believe they limit you to 5 seed packets, but that is every winter we do that program. We're really proud partners of the Student Youth Employee Program with the city, where we get high school students that we hire. That is in addition to our youth programming that we do as a part of Buff. And as I mentioned, we work with 26 Congolese families, 26 Congolese, 19 Nepalese families, in addition to our market grower program. And we collaborate really closely with the Lexington Farmers Market, introducing all of our market gardeners who go through our program to selling at the market. We really believe strongly in giving these market growers the opportunity to sell because it allows them to build a customer base and to really sort of inhabit this identity of being a farmer. If you have to introduce yourself and your crops to people who you're meeting at the Sunday market, then this really sort of allows you an entryway into understanding what it means to be a grower, the responsibility of being a grower and being accountable for the food that people put on their plates. So Bluegrass Urban Farm Friends is really exciting, and this began in 2023 with USDA funding, which has now come to a close. That funding made it possible for Seedleaf and Food Chain to initiate this program, which really sort of expanded what both of our organizations could have done individually. So before this, Seedleaf had a middle school program, SEEDS. It stood for Service, Entrepreneurship, and Education in Downtown Spaces. We are ACEs with acronyms. And it was, believe it or not, begun by Rebecca Self when she worked for Seedleaf before going to Food Chain. So Becca was a previous science school, I think, teacher, and brought that program or started that program at Seedleaf and had been going along just fine. And we had added on a high school program called FRESHES, Food, Research, and Education, Environmental Science for High School is what it was. And we were sort of beat. We had no indoor spaces. Seedleaf's, all of our spaces are outdoors when it rains or any other cataclysmic environmental happening. It means we had to cancel programs. Again, we're small staffed, and so we were giving a lot into these programs, but we weren't always sure that, you know, the kids were getting the full range of what they could get. In 2023, after talking with Leandra and Kristen at Food Chain, we thought, okay, well, let's try to partner up. You guys have an indoor space and an aquaponics farm. The kids can learn about aquaponics. They can do the traditional gardening and farm stuff with us, and then they'll get this more well-rounded agricultural education. And so today, that has, you know, morphed into this really lovely thing that has been recently funded by the Knight Foundation to continue. The Bluegrass Urban Farm Friends works with 10 high school students for the months of June and July, and then during the school year, there are interns who can continue this program doing projects in the Food Chain Aquaponics Farm. And then we have 20 middle schoolers for 2-week sessions, two 2-week sessions in the months of June and July. And throughout this process, they are getting a stipend for their work with us. So we do expect them to work. It's an early job experience, but it's work in the lightest sense. Otherwise, they would complain bitterly and with no end. And so it is interspersed with field trips, cooking classes. I believe they learn how to fillet a fish. So a lot of cool stuff. They get to go to the farmer's market and, reenact what it is to sell some of the produce that they've harvested and cared for. We go on field trips to Floracliff. I have some friends in the audience who have led these kiddos on tours at Floracliff. And so they're really getting to learn the full breadth and extent of agriculture and what that looks like in central Kentucky. And it is really awesome to see these kids who complain for most of the 2 months and you think they hate you, yet they come back. They come back and they come back and they come back because they've really sort of, something in this has inspired them and encouraged them. And so this has been really exciting. And so they're getting to build and maintain aquaponic systems. They build garden beds. They go into schools with us and they help to maintain some of the school gardens. And then they help to do community projects around town as well so that they can see the impact of their work out in the world, actually working and helping their neighbors get access to fresh food. It's really cool. In the next 2 years, we are partnering with Trees Lexington. They are an organization dedicated to planting trees on private land here in Fayette County to help the county achieve its climate goals. And so one of the big things that Trees Lexington is doing is working with schools, because Fayette County Public Schools is the largest private landowner in our county, and they have several big campuses that are largely bare of trees. And so Trees Lexington has been working on that, and our kiddos next year will be assisting and learning about proper tree care, tree anatomy, and why trees are important to our landscape and our ecosystem. And also, I just want to show you this. Outside of, our work with Buff, specifically, we're always working, again, with these after-school programs to get kiddos into garden spaces. So with after-school work, we're doing, your traditional planting in the garden. We're doing seed germination testing. In schools, we work with teachers to develop garden programming. We work with teachers to design school gardens, and we work with schools to maintain school gardens. It's an unfortunate truth that a garden that goes in after a couple of years might come out because they are a burden for grounds crew to maintain once a teacher leaves or if a teacher stops maintaining those raised beds. That is just sort of the sad state. And so to make sure those gardens don't go away and that kids have access to outdoor garden-based education, we have to be in schools doing maintenance alongside teachers. And so in that bottom photo, this is at George Washington Carver Elementary on 6th Street in town. We have a garden classroom. We've installed ourselves in that school to make sure that the garden stays maintained and that we make sure that kids, even if the teacher isn't experienced or knowledgeable, get outside to do some fun garden work. And I will also say, because it's something great, is that we recently were told that we have won the Golden Apple Award for this year from Fayette County Public Schools. And I think all that is you get a golden apple and a nice breakfast. And so if you're interested, it's September 12th, I believe downtown in Rupp Arena, but we were really happy to get that award. And so how to stay involved with Seedleaf and to continue this work of helping to support growers and communities. We have volunteer opportunities throughout the week listed at several sites. If you want to get out to the farm and see that space, I believe it's Wednesday mornings when we have that volunteer opportunity. If you just want to go and garden with us, we have about 4 sites where you can plug in and check out the spaces. London Farrell, Bryan Avenue, North Pole, and Roosevelt Avenue are our sites where you can go and sort of help volunteer. You can visit our website, www.seedleaf.org. There is a tab for volunteering there for you to get involved. If you have a business or an organization and you want to do team building, we love it when large groups of people come out especially when that dovetails with when we have a large pile of mulch that needs to get moved. Right now, North Pole has a large pile of mulch that needs to get moved. So if you have an organization and you want to come out and help us, please do. You can, again, go to our website, or you can email gardens@seedleaf.org. And then before you leave, oh, I added it to the new one. Well, then I'll go back to the screen. I will say fundraising for us is quite important, and what we are trying to do, sort of, the next moves within the next year is to continue to develop Headwater Farm. And so right now we are fundraising, or we will begin fundraising to build a welcome center, and we will begin fundraising in earnest to purchase a tractor. We have a really cute Ferguson Massey tractor. She's darling, she's nice and bright red, but she can only do so much. And so we need to step up. And so those are the two sort of elements that we're fundraising for. So if you're interested in learning more about that and how you can support our work, again, seedleaf.org is the link to check out. And that's it. Thank you guys so much. So Seedleaf.org is sort of your entryway into a lot of things Seedleaf. If you want to specifically sort of ask some questions about volunteering, like if you need anything in particular, the quick answer is no. But if you did have a question, you can email gardens@seedleaf.org. Our garden manager, Mar Cardenas, will answer your questions and get you set up. We usually recommend that you just wear comfortable clothing. Chiggers and mosquitoes are real. Don't be silly and wear short shorts in the garden. Bring bug spray, sunscreen, and a water bottle, and then the rest we'll have for you. Yeah, this one was a really interesting story, and it sort of speaks to the power of having community partners. And so when No Lie CDC still existed, they had gotten a grant called Plant and Play, if I remember correctly, and that incorporated the North Limestone neighborhood. So all the neighborhoods were jutting off of the North Limestone corridor, Castlewood Park, so it involved Parks and Rec, Seedleaf, in addition to several other community partners. And so we went to these planning sessions, and one of the things I think floated up to the top was this need for fruit trees. And so we participated in that, and we were able to then plant our orchard there. And I think the key to having a relationship with Parks and Rec is just being consistent and reliable. So if you are going to do something, do it and stay on top of it. And I think we were just able to prove that, we could consistently care after the space, because a lot of the other infrastructure that went in with that grant, I think, has sort of fallen by the wayside because there just wasn't maintenance built in. And Seedleaf was able, because of our mission and because of what we believe in, whether we had the money or not, we continued with the maintenance to do that. And so we were able to show our consistency. We were able to continue to maintain the orchards, and I think that's what's lent us to have this relationship with them. No. Not at all. So again, Seedleaf is not the gardeners of Lexington. We can't be. The vision that we're trying to work toward is a city of gardens, right? We believe that gardens and these green spaces that are active, that are beautiful, that are places that you can participate in, provide a kind of civic infrastructure where we can see each other as neighbors, where we can socialize, where we can get away from the screens and the things that perhaps divide us in other realms of our lives. And we want people in their community, wherever you might be, to get with your neighbors and say, hey, wouldn't it be cool to have something like this, and to organize and do so. What Seedleaf does do is work with groups, coach groups on how to get started with community gardening. We try to connect people with the resources, if we don't have it, what you can use to get started. And yeah, we're just sort of like a nice, happy backup. If you need a tool we'll more than happily loan you a tool. If you need help getting land cleared, we talk about different processes for doing that. And so we try to help people or coach people through the hurdles you might face with getting started. We definitely want a city that's filled with gardens. That is like, Seedleaf is done when we can walk down the street and see several gardens in a row. We just don't want to be the ones to do all of them. Yeah. Great question. And so for us, what we are working on, sustainability, reducing the resources that are going into our production. And so really pressing that with growers, thinking about water resources, right? Soil inputs, how we treat the soil. So we do try our best to incorporate no-till practices. But even more than that, and we talked about this today at our staff meeting, is really thinking about labor resources. Y'all, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's incredibly hot outside and it's only going to get hotter. And the biggest hurdle that I think we're now facing to getting people engaged in growing is being comfortable with being outside, period. Right? And so we're now increasingly talking about how does one maintain your body over the long haul to do this work of being a farmer. If we want to continue to create growers and support them through this, then we have to help and coach growers on maintaining their physical resources and the physical resources of those who are working with them and what is increasingly challenging times. And so, increasingly within our organization, with employees, I'm trying to figure out how to make sure that people just aren't literally burnt out because it is so hot outside. And that's tricky, and I'm still figuring that out. And so in addition to thinking about soil and land health, which are pretty major, we're talking more and more about physical well-being and how to maintain that. That one's also been a tricky learning curve for us as well. What we have found is that to be in transition to organic, we need to follow very strict specifications for how we make up compost for the farm. And it is not easy to find organic compost that you can then add onto your farm to help with your growing practices. So we've had to really hone in on a really stringent cover cropping routine with the help of NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service here in town, which has been really great. It's also, however, been a bit of a friction point, to be perfectly honest, because we have these growers and we've said, here is your land. And then in the fall, we have to say, well, yes, this is your land, but at this community farm, we cover crop. So we need you to clear out your crop so that we can get a cover crop down because it's helping to build the soil here for the long term. So having to match that with where some of our growers were at, that was a difficult conversation that we had to have. It's kind of one of the problems that we have to navigate as being a community farm, needing to protect this asset for the long haul while also satisfy the needs of our growers. But yeah, getting organic material into farmland, doing that under this really strict regime of being organic has been more difficult than we thought. Yeah, it's been incredibly tricky. And right now, the only solution that we have found is cover cropping, making sure that you stick to a cover cropping schedule to increase the biomass and organic matter in your soil. That's the only thing that we have figured out when you're working at a larger scale. Yes, okay, good question. So I don't know the names of all of them. So with our Congolese folks, the thing is they are the same things that we grow, but they're different parts of the plant, right? And so there's something called lenga-lenga, which I think is perhaps what we call pigweed, but they use the leaves and they put that in soup. The leaves on sweet potatoes, they don't get the potato, they take the leaves, and that's what they use for stews. They grow an eggplant that to me looks like they're picking it when it's really immature and not ripe, but they put that in stews and it's white and it's small, that they grow on pretty large scale. And then the other things that we've seen them grow is lots of tomato plants as well, different types of tomato. I think there is always massive heartbreak for our Congolese when they realize that cassava just can't cut it here. There is a deep love and need for yams in African culture. And unfortunately, Lexington, Kentucky, zone 6, 7, we just don't have a long enough growing season for that. For the Nepalese, it has been buckwheat, surprisingly. Buckwheat and corn is a lot of what they have focused on. So with the Nepalese, a little bit more similar to us, but yeah, just grains are really what they have sort of focused on.